The bright white lights of the learning station made everything look strange and cold. Hannah pressed her small face against the thick glass window and watched the stars spinning slowly outside. She had never seen so many stars before. Back on Earth, the city lights always hid most of them. Here in space, millions of tiny lights filled the darkness like scattered diamonds. "Look at that big one," whispered Kim Minho from beside her. He was pointing at a blue star that seemed much bigger than the others. "My dad said that might be our sun from here." Hannah nodded but did not speak. She was thinking about her mother. Back on Earth, her mother had cried when the government people came to take Hannah away for the special school program. But her mother had also been proud. Very few children got chosen for the alien teacher program. Only the smartest kids from each country could go. The door to their waiting room opened with a soft hissing sound. A tall woman in a blue uniform walked in. She had kind eyes, but her face looked worried. "Children, please follow me to the learning chamber," the woman said in Korean. "Remember what we taught you on the ship. Be polite, be respectful. These alien teachers are very important beings from across the galaxy. They are here to help you learn." 20 human children stood up from their chairs. They were all from Korea, all between 7 and 10 years old. Hannah was the smallest at 8 years old. Some of the older boys, like Choi Dae-yoon, were already much taller than her. But Hannah was not worried about being small. Her grandmother always said that good things come in small packages. They walked through long white hallways. The walls were smooth and had no decorations. Everything smelled clean but strange, like the air after lightning strikes during summer storms. Their footsteps made soft echoing sounds as they walked. The learning chamber was enormous. The ceiling was so high that Hannah had to bend her neck back to see the top. The walls were made of clear crystal that showed the stars outside. In the center of the room stood the biggest creature Hannah had ever seen. The alien teacher was at least 3 meters tall. His skin was dark green and covered with small scales that caught the light. His head was long and narrow like a lizard, with golden eyes that seemed to look in all directions at once. He had 4 arms instead of 2, and each hand had long fingers with sharp claws at the tips. "Welcome, young humans," the creature said. His voice was deep and made a rumbling sound, like distant thunder. When he spoke, Hannah could see rows of pointed teeth. "I am Instructor Velthera of the Kethmoran Empire. You may call me teacher." The human children stood in a straight line like they had been taught. Some of the younger ones looked scared. Park Jimin, who was only 7, was holding back tears. But most of them just stared at their alien teacher with wide eyes full of curiosity. "You are here because your species has just joined our galactic community," Velthara continued. "We have studied your people for many years. We know that humans are ... fragile creatures. Your bones break easily. Your skin tears from small cuts. You cannot survive in most planetary environments without special equipment." Hannah frowned slightly. She did not like being called fragile. Her grandmother had raised her to be strong. Every morning before school, Hannah did exercises and practiced. The martial arts forms her grandmother taught her. She could break wooden boards with her bare hands. That did not seem very fragile to her. "But do not worry," the alien teacher said, his golden eyes scanning the group of children. "We will be very gentle with you. We understand that human younglings need special care and protection. Our teaching methods have been adjusted for your ... limitations." Behind Hannah, she heard Choi Dae-yoon make a small angry sound in his throat. She turned slightly and saw that his hands were clenched into fists. Daeon was the best student in their group back on Earth. He could solve math problems at even high. School students found difficult. He probably did not like being told he had limitations either. Velthera moved to a large table covered with strange glowing devices. "Today we will begin with simple physics. We will start with concepts that even the youngest species in our galaxy can understand. Basic gravitational forces and planetary motion." He touched one of the devices, and suddenly the air above the table filled with tiny lights. The lights formed the shape of a solar system, with planets moving slowly around a central star. It was beautiful and fascinating.
observe, Valthera said.
Is a standard star system. The large object in the center is the star. The smaller objects moving around it are planets. The force that keeps the planets in their paths is called gravity. Kim Minho raised his hand. The alien teacher looked surprised that a student wanted to speak so soon. Yes, young human. Teacher, I have a question about orbital mechanics, Minho said politely. If gravity gets weaker with distance, why do the outer planets not spiral away from the star? And how does the orbital velocity change based on the distance from the central mass? Valthara stopped moving. His golden eyes focused completely on the small boy who had asked the question. The alien teacher had clearly not expected such a complex question from what he thought was a simple, fragile creature. That is, a more advanced topic, Valthera said slowly. Perhaps we should focus on basic concepts first. But now, other hands were going up. Song Minji wanted to know about tidal forces. Park Yun-ho asked about binary star systems. Lee Soyan had questions about planetary formation in asteroid belts. Hannah watched her alien teacher's face change. Golden eyes grew wider. His four hands moved nervously over his teaching devices. He had expected to teach very basic lessons to weak, simple creatures. Instead, he was facing 20 human children who already understood concepts that most adult aliens learned in advanced classes. Valthara made notes on a small device attached to his arm. Hannah could not read the alien symbols, but she could tell that their teacher was writing very quickly. Something important was happening here, something the aliens had not expected. The first lesson continued for 2 hours. By the end, Valthera had stopped using simple explanations. The human children kept asking questions that pushed deeper and deeper into complex physics and mathematics. They wanted to understand not just what happened, but why it happened and how it connected to other things they had learned. When the lesson ended, the alien teacher stood very still for a long moment. He looked at each human child with his strange, golden eyes. Hannah felt like he was seeing them differently now than when the lesson had started. Class dismissed, Valthara said quietly. Tomorrow we will adjust our curriculum. As the human children filed out of the crystal chamber, Hannah heard the alien teacher speaking into his communication device. The words were in his own language, but his tone sounded surprised and maybe a little worried. Walking back through the white hallways, Hannah thought about what had just happened. The aliens thought humans were weak and fragile. They thought human children needed special protection and gentle treatment. But they were wrong about that. Very wrong. Hannah smiled to herself as she looked out at the spinning stars. This was going to be more interesting than anyone had expected. 3 weeks had passed since the human children first arrived at the learning station. Every day brought new surprises for Instructor Valthera. These small creatures that his people had labeled as fragile and simple were proving to be anything. But ordinary Park Hannah sat in her usual spot near the front of the crystal chamber. She had her notebook open and was writing down questions about quantum mechanics. Yesterday, she had asked Valthera about particle wave duality. The day before, she wanted to know why light sometimes acted like a wave and sometimes like tiny particles. The alien teacher found himself staying up late each night, preparing lessons that could challenge these remarkable young minds. His original teaching materials, designed for what he thought would be basic instruction, had become useless after the first week. These human children were learning faster than most adult species in the galaxy. Kim Minho raised his hand again. Teacher, I was thinking about what you said yesterday about space-time curvature. If massive objects bend space-time, does that mean time moves differently near black holes? Valthera paused his holographic demonstration. Another complex question. From an 8-year-old human, scaled face showed a mixture of amazement and frustration. He had taught thousands of students from dozens of species, but none had ever challenged him like these human younglings. Yes, young Minho, Valthara replied. Time does indeed move slower near objects with strong gravitational fields. It is called time dilation. Park Hannah looked up from her notebook. So if someone traveled close to a black hole and came back, they would be younger than people who stayed far away. Exactly correct, the alien teacher said, his golden eyes focusing on the small girl. You understand concepts that most university students struggle with. As the days passed, Velthera found himself growing both impressed and concerned about these human children. They were far more intelligent than his species had predicted. But intelligence alone was not enough to survive in the galaxy. These creatures needed to learn proper respect for authority. They needed to understand their place in the galactic order. The Kethmoran Empire had rules about education.
All students,
No matter how smart, had to learn discipline. They had to understand that knowledge came with responsibility, and responsibility meant obeying those who knew better. Velthera had been putting off this important lesson because he enjoyed the humans' curious questions. But his superiors were beginning to ask why he had not implemented standard protocols. On the morning of the 22nd day, Velthera made his decision. Today he would conduct the authority response test. This was a standard procedure used across the galaxy to teach young students proper submission to their teachers. It was always done the same way. A controlled physical correction followed by a test question to measure the student's appropriate response. The lesson that day was about stellar formation. Velthera explained how gravity pulled cosmic dust together. To create new stars, the human children listened carefully and asked their usual intelligent questions. Song Minji wanted to know about brown dwarfs. Choi Dae-yoon asked about neutron stars. Park Yoon-ho was curious about white dwarf cooling rates, but it was Park Hannah who asked the question that made Velthera decide she would be the test subject. "Teacher," Hannah said, her small hand raised politely, "if stars form from gravitational collapse, why do some regions of space have more star formation than others? Is it related to the density of the cosmic medium? Or are there other factors like magnetic fields and turbulence?" The question was brilliant. It showed understanding not just of basic stellar formation, but of the complex interplay between multiple physical forces. This 8-year-old human girl was discussing concepts that graduate students in astrophysics found challenging, but that was exactly the problem. She was becoming too confident, too willing to challenge her teacher with difficult questions. Needed to learn proper respect, Velthera moved slowly across the crystal chamber. His forearms hung at his sides. His golden eyes fixed on Park Hannah, who continued writing in her notebook. Unaware of what was about to happen, the other human children sensed something different in their teacher's behavior. Kim Min-ho looked up from his holographic display. Choi Dae-yoon stopped taking notes. Song Mingi turned in her chair to watch the alien instructor's approach. Velthera stopped directly in front of Park Hannah's desk. The small girl looked up at him with curious dark eyes. She had no idea what was coming. In her mind, she was probably preparing another complex question about stellar physics. Student Park Hannah, Velthera said in his deep, rumbling voice, "You have been asking many questions." "Yes, teacher," Hannah replied politely. "I want to understand how the universe works." "Understanding requires discipline," the alien teacher said. "It requires knowing your place."
out,
Without any warning, Velthera's lower right hand moved in a quick striking motion.
out.
Among his own species, this would be considered a mild disciplinary tap, a gentle correction to remind a student of proper respect. The strike was aimed at the side of Hannah's face, calculated to cause brief pain but no lasting damage. What happened next occurred faster than Velthera's enhanced alien reflexes. Could process Park Hannah's response was instantaneous. Her small human hand moved like lightning, intercepting Velthera's striking limb. Her fingers found the exact joint where his jaw connected to his skull. With a precise twisting motion that seemed impossible for such a small creature, she applied focused pressure to the vulnerable connection point. The sound that filled the crystal chamber was loud and sharp. Velthera's jaw joint separated with a wet, popping noise that echoed off the transparent walls. The massive alien instructor collapsed to the floor, his forearms clutching at his displaced mandible. Golden eyes were wide with shock and pain. "Park." Hannah stepped back from her desk. Her dark eyes blazed with controlled anger, but her voice remained perfectly calm and steady. "Was that supposed to be a test question?" she asked. The other human children immediately surrounded their classmate. Choi Dae-yoon placed himself between Hannah and the fallen alien teacher. Kim Min-ho helped Hannah gather her notebook and papers. Song Min-ji watched the doorway to make sure no other aliens were coming. On the floor, Velthera made strangled sounds through his dislocated jaw. He had taught thousands of students. He'd administered the authority response test countless times. Never, in all his years of teaching, had a student responded with violence. And never had any creature, adult or child, moved fast enough to counter his strike and inflict serious injury in return. The Crystal Chamber's emergency systems activated. Medical drones descended from hidden panels in the ceiling. Red warning. Lights flashed as the station's computer systems registered an incident requiring immediate attention. But Park Hana ignored all of this. She stood perfectly still, her small hands at her sides, waiting for an answer to her question. In her mind, she had done nothing wrong. Someone had tried to hit her, so she had defended herself. It was a simple and logical response. What she did not understand was that her simple and logical response had just changed everything. The galaxy was about to learn that their assumptions about humanity were completely wrong. The medical drones surrounded Valthera, working to relocate his jaw and treat his injuries. But the real damage was not physical. The authority response test had revealed something that would shake the foundations of galactic education. These human children were not fragile, creatures needing protection. They were something far more dangerous and far more wonderful than anyone had imagined. The emergency alert reached the Galactic Education Consortium headquarters within minutes of the incident, across 3 star systems. Alien officials stopped their daily activities to read the Priority Alpha report that appeared on their communication devices. The message was simple but shocking. A human child had seriously injured a trained Kethmoran instructor during a routine educational assessment in the medical bay of the learning station. Instructor Valthera lay on a treatment table. While robotic arms worked to repair his damaged jaw, the medical drones had successfully relocated the joint. But the alien teacher's pride was wounded far worse than his face. In 40 years of teaching, nothing like this had ever happened to him. Dr. Zethkal, station's chief medical officer, examined the injury reports with growing amazement. The Mantheri physician had 6 arms and compound eyes that could see details invisible to most species. What he discovered in his examination made him call for additional scans. Instructor Valthera. Dr. Zethkal said in his clicking voice. The human child's strike was incredibly precise. She targeted the exact weak point in Kethmoran anatomy. The force was calculated perfectly to cause dislocation without permanent damage. How did an 8-year-old creature know our biological structure so well? Valthera tried to speak, but winced in pain. His jaw was held in place by medical braces that would need to stay attached for several days. Through the communication device attached to his throat, he managed to answer. She did not hesitate, he said, the moment I moved. To strike her, she responded. It was not planned. It was instinct. This information was immediately transmitted to the consortium's xenobiology department. Within hours, the galaxy's leading experts on alien species were analyzing video footage of the incident. They watched the security recording over and over, measuring reaction times and studying Park Hana's movements. On the planet Nexus Prime, home to the Galactic Education Consortium's main offices, emergency sessions were called in multiple government buildings. Representatives from 15 different species gathered in the Great Assembly Hall to discuss what had happened. Council leader Thax Morris, a tall blue-skinned being from the Villani Republic, called the meeting to order. His 4 eyes scanned the assembled delegates as he spoke. Fellow beings, we have a serious problem. Our assessment of the human species appears to have been completely wrong. A human child has injured one of our most experienced instructors using combat techniques. We did not know her species possessed. The delegate from the Zephyrian Trade Union, a floating jellyfish-like creature named Quindala, pulsed with worried colors. Our trade agreements with Earth assume that humans are a peaceful, fragile species requiring protection. If they have hidden military capabilities, we need to reconsider everything. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Dr. Li Guan was having the worst day of her career. As Earth's chief representative to the Galactic Education Consortium, she had spent years convincing alien species that humanity was ready to join galactic civilization. Now she was being summoned to an emergency hearing to explain why a human child had attacked an alien instructor. The communication came through quantum relay system that connected Earth to the galactic network. The message was formal and Cold. Representative Li Guan must appear before the Consortium Council within 72 Earth hours to provide explanation for the violent actions of human educational participants. Dr. Li gathered her research team and began preparing for what might be the most important presentation in human history. They pulled together every piece of data they had about human biology, psychology, and cultural development. But as they worked, they realized that they might have made a terrible mistake in how they had presented humanity to the galaxy. On the learning station, the 20 human children were confined to their living quarters, while alien officials decided what to do with them. Park Hannah sat on her bed reading a book about stellar physics. She seemed completely unaware that her actions had caused a galactic crisis. Choi, Italian, paced back and forth across their common room. "This is not fair," he said angrily. Hannah was defending herself. Any person would do the same thing. "We are not on Earth anymore," said Song Minji quietly. "We are guests here. Maybe their rules are different." Kim Min-hao looked up from the tablet he was using to study alien mathematics. Their teacher tried to hit Hannah. That is wrong in any civilization. If their rules say teachers can hit students, then their rules are bad rules. The human children did not understand why they were being kept in their rooms. From their perspective, Park Hannah had done nothing wrong. When someone tries to hurt you, you defend yourself. This was basic human behavior that every child learned from their parents. But the aliens saw things very differently. In galactic civilization, students never fought back against teachers. Young beings were supposed to accept correction from their elders without question. The authority response test was designed to reinforce this natural order. No species had ever responded with violence before. The xenobiology experts on Nexus Prime made a disturbing discovery as they analyzed the security footage. Park Hannah's defensive move was not something she had learned in school. It was too fast, too precise, too perfectly executed. This was an instinctive response programmed into human biology. Dr. Kethyuna, the galaxy's leading expert on predator species, presented her findings to the Emergency Council. "Fellow beings, we must reconsider our classification of humanity. These creatures evolved on what we call a death world. Every aspect of their biology is designed for survival in extreme conditions." She activated a holographic display showing Earth's environment. Images of hurricanes, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and dangerous animals filled the air above the council table. "Look at their planet," Dr. Cthulhu continued. "Massive storms that can destroy cities, ground that shakes and splits open, mountains that explode with liquid fire. Animals with claws and teeth designed for killing. Humans evolved surrounded by constant danger." The council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Most of them came from peaceful worlds where the biggest natural threat was an occasional rainstorm. "This explains the child's response," the xenobiologist continued. "When threatened, humans automatically access combat reflexes developed over millions of years of evolution." Park Hannah did not choose to defend herself. Her body reacted before her mind could even process what was happening. The implications of this discovery spread through the galactic government like ripples in a pond. If human children possessed such advanced defensive capabilities, what about human adults? What about human military forces? Trade agreements were put on hold. Diplomatic missions were postponed. Several species began reviewing their security protocols for dealing with human visitors. On the learning station, Instructor Valthera was finally able to speak normally again. The medical braces had been removed from his jaw, and the swelling had gone down. But his perspective on his human students had changed completely. He requested permission to continue teaching the human children. Despite his injury, his supervisors were surprised by this request. They expected him to want nothing more to do with these dangerous creatures. "They are not dangerous," Valthera explained to his superior, Administrator Korvax. "They are remarkable. The child who injured me was not being aggressive. She was protecting herself. There is a difference." Administrator Korvax, a massive insectoid being with multiple legs and compound eyes, clicked his mandibles in confusion. "She seriously injured you, Instructor. How can you say she is not dangerous?" "Because she could have done much worse," Valthara replied. "I have studied the medical reports. Her strike was precise and controlled. She used exactly enough force to stop my attack without causing permanent damage. Aggressive creature. Would have continued fighting until I was dead. This revelation added another layer to the growing understanding of human capabilities. These creatures were not just instinctively defensive. They were capable of controlling their responses, even in moments of immediate threat. The galaxy was beginning to realize they had welcomed a species unlike any they had ever encountered before. Humans were not the fragile, peaceful creatures they appeared to be. They were survivors from a world that had taught them to be strong, smart, and incredibly controlled. And they were just getting started. The research team on Nexus Prime worked around the clock for 5 straight days. Every xenanthropologist, evolutionary biologist, and cultural expert in the galaxy had been called to help study humanity. What they discovered challenged everything. The galactic community thought they knew about intelligent life. Dr. Velterra, the consortium's leading expert on species development, stood before a massive holographic display showing Earth's timeline. Her tentacled form moved gracefully as she pointed to different periods in human evolution. "Look at this data," she said to her assembled team. "Humans survived ice ages that would have killed most species. They lived through asteroid impacts, supervolcanic eruptions, and magnetic pole reversals. Their planet tried to destroy them dozens of times, and they just kept adapting." The hologram showed early humans running from giant predators, surviving in frozen wastelands, and developing tools to hunt creatures 10 times their size. Each challenge had made them stronger, smarter, and more resourceful. "But here's the most interesting part," Dr. Velterra continued. "They did not just survive, they thrived. They turned every threat into an advantage. They learned to use fire, build shelters, and create weapons. They became the most successful predator on their planet." Dr. Vexmal, a crystalline being from the Silicon Reaches, vibrated with concern. "Are you saying that humans are natural killers?" I would explain the child's violent response to authority. "No," Dr. Velterra replied firmly. "That is where our understanding was wrong. Humans are not naturally violent. They are naturally protective. There is a crucial difference." She changed the holographic display to show human families and communities. Parents caring for children, adults sharing food with strangers, humans risking their lives to save others during natural disasters. "Observe their behavior patterns," the xenanthropologist explained. "Humans only use violence to protect themselves or others." The child at the learning station did not attack her instructor. She defended herself against what she perceived as an unprovoked assault. Meanwhile, on Earth, Ambassador Jin Sora was preparing for the most important journey of her diplomatic career. She had been selected to represent humanity at the Emergency Consortium hearings. Her transport ship was loaded with cultural artifacts, educational materials, and video recordings that would help explain human society to concerned alien officials. As her ship traveled through hyperspace toward Nexus Prime, Jin Sora reviewed the materials her team had prepared. There were videos of human children playing sports that involved deliberate physical contact, recordings of martial arts competitions where participants bowed respectfully to each other before and after intense combat, documentation of human military training that emphasized protection of civilians above all else. But the most important materials were the simple, everyday videos of human families. Parents teaching their children to defend themselves while also teaching them never to hurt others unnecessarily. Grandparents showing young ones how to be strong while remaining kind. Teachers explaining that true strength comes from protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Back on the learning station, the human children were finally allowed to return to their classes. But everything had changed. Their lessons now took place in a heavily monitored environment, with multiple alien observers taking notes on every interaction. Park. Hannah entered the crystal chamber and saw Instructor Velterra waiting for her. His jaw was still slightly swollen, but he was back to teaching. When he saw her, he did something that surprised everyone in the room. He bowed his head respectfully. "Student Park Hannah," he said in his deep voice, "I owe you an apology. I acted According to protocols that were not appropriate for your species, I should have learned about human customs before attempting to teach human students. Hannah looked confused. In her mind, she had done nothing that required an apology from her teacher. Teacher Valthera, I am sorry I hurt you. I did not mean to cause serious injury. I was just trying to make you stop. This simple exchange was recorded and transmitted immediately to xenopsychologists across the galaxy. The human child showed remorse for the damage she had caused, even though she had been defending herself. The alien instructor acknowledged his mistake and took responsibility for creating the dangerous situation. Dr. Kexthera, the galaxy's leading expert on juvenile behavior, analyzed the conversation with growing amazement. This is unprecedented, she reported to the Consortium Council. Both individuals are taking responsibility for their actions while acknowledging the other's perspective. This level of social complexity is rarely seen in adult members of most species. The research teams began studying human childhood development more carefully. What they found amazed them. Human children were taught from an early age to consider the consequences of their actions, to empathize with others, and to use the minimum force necessary to resolve conflicts. Look at these training videos, Dr. Valterra showed her team. Human parents teach their children combat techniques, but every lesson includes instruction about when not to use those techniques. They learn to fight, but they also learn restraint. Holographic display showed human children in martial arts classes. The young students practiced powerful strikes and defensive moves, but they also practiced meditation, respect for opponents, and control of their emotions. This explains why the child's response was so precise, observed Dr. Dexmel. She has been trained since infancy to use exactly the right amount of force for each situation. When her instructor struck her, her training automatically calculated the minimum response needed to stop the threat. As the research continued, the aliens discovered more surprising facts about human biology. Human children possessed reflexes that were faster than most adult aliens. They could process visual information and react to threats in milliseconds. Their bone density and muscle development gave them physical capabilities that seemed impossible for their size, but the most remarkable discovery was about human pain tolerance. When Dr. Zethkol analyzed Park Hannah's medical scans from after the incident, he found something that shocked him. The girl showed no signs of stress or trauma from the confrontation. Her heart rate and brain activity were completely normal. She treated the entire incident as a minor inconvenience, the Manthari physician reported. For her, dislocating an adult alien's jaw was no more stressful than solving a difficult math problem. This revelation led to a disturbing realization about human capabilities. If their children could casually disable trained alien instructors, what could human adults do? The galaxy's military analysts began reviewing all available data about human physical development. What they found kept them awake for many nights. Human adults were approximately 3 times stronger than their children. They were faster, more coordinated, and had access to technological weapons that could level entire cities. Yet somehow, this incredibly dangerous species had developed a culture based on protection rather than conquest. Ambassador Jin Sora arrived at Nexus Prime. Just as these discoveries were being compiled into official reports, she was escorted to the Great Assembly Hall, where representatives from dozens of species waited to question her about humanity's true nature. As she stood before the Galactic Council, Jin Sora realized that this moment would determine humanity's future in galactic civilization. The aliens were afraid of her species, but they were also fascinated. They had never encountered a people who combined such devastating capabilities with such strong moral restraints. Jin Sora began, "My people come before you not as conquerors, but as protectors. We offer our strength to defend those who cannot defend themselves. We offer our knowledge to advance the cause of peace throughout the galaxy." The council chamber fell silent as alien officials considered her words. They had spent days learning about humanity's capacity for violence. Now, they needed to decide whether they could trust humanity's commitment to peace. The future of human-alien relations hung in the balance, waiting for their decision. The Great Assembly Hall on Nexus Prime had never hosted such an important meeting. Representatives from 47 different species filled the massive chamber, all waiting to hear Ambassador Jin Sora explain humanity's place in galactic civilization. The air hummed with nervous energy as beings who had never agreed on anything prepared to make a decision that would affect the entire galaxy. Jin Sora stood at the center of the circular hall, surrounded by alien delegates whose forms ranged from crystalline geometries to flowing liquid shapes. Above her head, holographic displays showed the evidence that had been gathered about human capabilities. Video footage of Park Hannah's defensive strike played repeatedly, analyzed frame by computers that measured every movement. Council. Leader Thox Morris called the session to order with a deep tone that resonated through the chamber's acoustic systems. His 4 blue eyes focused on the human ambassador as he spoke. Ambassador Jin Sora of Earth, your species stands accused of misrepresenting their true nature to this consortium. We have discovered that humans possess military capabilities far beyond what was disclosed during your application for membership. How do you respond to these charges? Jin Sora had prepared for this moment during her long journey through hyperspace. She knew that humanity's future in galactic society depended on how well she could explain her people's complex nature. Honored council leader and esteemed representatives, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. A people did not hide our capabilities because we intended to deceive you. We did not mention them because we do not. Think of ourselves as warriors. We think of ourselves as protectors. She activated her own holographic display, showing scenes from Earth that her diplomatic team had carefully selected. The first image showed human firefighters running into burning buildings to save strangers. The next showed Coast Guard rescuers diving into stormy seas to help sinking ships. Then came footage of human doctors working without rest during natural disasters, treating anyone who needed help regardless of species or nationality. These are our true warriors, Jin Sora explained. People who risk their lives not to destroy, but to preserve. Not to conquer, but to protect. The Zephyrian delegate, Quindala, pulsed with skeptical colors. Yet your child seriously injured? One of our most experienced instructors. How do you explain such violence from one so young? Jin Sora nodded, expecting this question. Not understand Park Hannah's actions, you must understand human childhood. May I show you how human parents teach their children? Without waiting for permission, she began playing video recordings from Earth. The first showed a human father teaching his young daughter basic self-defense moves. But the lesson did not focus on how to hurt others. Instead, the father emphasized when to use these techniques and when to walk away from trouble. Remember, Hannah, the father said in the recording, fighting is always the last choice. First, you try to talk, then you try to leave. Only fight if someone will not let you go and is trying to hurt you. The alien delegates watched in fascination. As more videos played, human children learning martial arts that emphasized respect for opponents. Young people practicing combat sports that ended with participants bowing to each other and shaking hands. Military training exercises where soldiers learned to minimize harm to civilians even during dangerous missions. Dr. Veltara, who had been studying human development for weeks, rose from her seat in the observation area. Council Leader May. I present our research findings. Thax Morris gestured for her to proceed. The xenanthropologist activated a complex display showing human brain development patterns. We have discovered something remarkable about human psychology, Dr. Veltara announced. Their brains are literally wired to protect others. The same neural pathways that enable their combat reflexes also drive their protective instincts. They cannot separate the two functions. The display showed brain scans of human children during various activities. When the children saw others in danger, the same brain regions activated that controlled their defensive responses. When they saw others being hurt, their stress levels increased as if they themselves were under attack. This explains why human societies develop such strong ethical codes, the scientist continued. They are biologically incapable of feeling safe while others around them are in danger. This is why they create laws to protect the weak, why they share resources with strangers, why they risk their lives for people they have never met. Back on the learning station, Instructor Velthera was discovering this truth firsthand. had been given permission to continue teaching the human children, but now he approached his lessons completely differently. Instead of trying to impose galactic educational standards, he was learning to work with human nature. "Today we will study planetary defense systems," he announced to his class. "Can anyone tell me why civilizations need to protect their worlds from asteroid impacts?" Kim Min-ho raised his hand immediately. "Because if we do not protect our planet, everyone who lives there will die. It is our responsibility to keep people safe." Valthera nodded approvingly. A few weeks ago he would have expected students to focus on the technical aspects of deflector shields and gravitational manipulation. But human children automatically thought about the people who needed protection. Every lesson became an exercise in applied compassion. Song Mingi asked about emergency evacuation procedures for space stations. Choi Daeon wanted to know how to calculate life support requirements for refugee ships. Park Hyun-ho was curious about medical response protocols during natural disasters. These questions revealed something that amazed the alien instructor. Human intelligence was not just analytical, it was empathetic. These children could not learn about any system without immediately considering how it affected the welfare of others. Park Hannah remained quiet during most of the discussion. But when Valthara asked about planetary shield efficiency, she raised her hand with a complex question. "Teacher, if a planet's defensive shields are powered by fusion reactors, and those reactors are targeted by enemy weapons, would it be better to distribute multiple smaller power sources across the surface instead of using centralized facilities? That way, even if some are destroyed, the remaining shields could still protect civilian populations." The question demonstrated advanced understanding of engineering, military strategy, and humanitarian priorities all at once. Valthera realized that this 8-year-old human was already thinking like a seasoned planetary defense coordinator in the Great Assembly Hall. Ambassador Jin Sora was answering increasingly detailed questions about human capabilities and intentions. The alien delegates were beginning to understand that humanity represented something entirely new in galactic civilization. "Your species possesses the ability to dominate this galaxy," observed the delegate from the crystalline hegemony. "But you seek membership rather than conquest." "Why?" Jin Sora smiled sadly. "Because domination would require us to become something we are not. We would have to stop protecting and start destroying. We would have to abandon the values that make us human. Victory without honor is just another form of defeat." The session continued for hours as representatives questioned every aspect of human society. They examined Earth's history, looking for evidence of aggressive expansion or conquest. What they found instead was a species that had fought countless wars against themselves, but had gradually learned to resolve conflicts through cooperation rather than violence. "We are not perfect," Jin Sora admitted. "We have made terrible mistakes. We have hurt each other and damaged our own world. But we have also learned from those mistakes. We have chosen to be better than our worst impulses." As the hearing drew to a close, it became clear that the galaxy faced an unprecedented decision. They could accept humanity as partners, knowing that these newcomers possessed the power to change everything, or they could reject human membership, potentially creating the very threat they feared. The vote would determine not just humanity's future, but the future of galactic civilization itself. And in a crystal chamber on a distant learning station, 20 human children continued asking questions that challenged everything their alien teachers thought they knew about the universe. 6 months had passed since Park Hannah dislocated instructor Valthera's jaw with a single precise movement. The learning station that had once been designed to teach fragile, human children basic galactic concepts had transformed into something entirely different. It was now the most advanced educational facility in known space, where alien instructors came to learn as much as they taught. The crystal chamber where the incident occurred had been renamed the Hannah Protocol Center. A small plaque near the entrance read, "Questions lead to understanding. Understanding leads to progress. Progress leads to peace." The words were written in 47 different languages, representing every species in the galactic education. Consortium. Park Hannah stood at the front of that same chamber, But now she was not just a student. At 8 years old, she had become the youngest expert advisor in consortium history. Her small hands moved confidently over holographic displays as she explained new teaching methods to a group of alien educators who had traveled from across the galaxy to learn from her. "The most important thing to remember," Hannah said in her clear, calm voice, "is that every species learns differently. You cannot use the same methods for everyone. What works for crystalline beings might not work for energy creatures. What helps? Insectoid minds might confuse mammalian thought processes." The assembled alien instructors took careful notes. These were experienced teachers who had educated thousands of students, yet they hung on every word spoken by this human child. Her insights had already revolutionized education in dozens of star systems. Instructor Velthera sat in the front row. His jaw completely healed, but his perspective permanently changed. He had requested to remain as Hannah's primary instructor, not because she needed teaching, but because he never stopped learning from her questions. "Student Hannah," he said, using the title they had both agreed to keep despite the changed circumstances. "Yesterday you mentioned that empathy could be taught through shared problem-solving. Can you elaborate on that concept?" Hannah's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. "Yes, Teacher Velthera. When students work together to solve problems that affect others, they begin to understand how their actions impact different kinds of beings. They learn to consider perspectives that are completely different from their own." She activated a holographic display showing a complex scenario. For example, imagine a space station losing life support. Students from different species would each contribute their unique abilities to solve the crisis. The crystalline students might calculate structural integrity. The energy beings could analyze power flow problems. The insectoid students could coordinate multiple simultaneous repairs. The alien instructors murmured appreciatively. This teaching method had already been implemented in several consortium schools with remarkable results. Students were not just learning technical skills. They were developing genuine concern for beings completely unlike themselves. In the administrative offices of the learning station, Ambassador Jin Sora was meeting with consortium officials to review humanity's progress. In Galactic society, the fears that had dominated the emergency sessions 6 months ago had been replaced by eager cooperation and mutual respect. "The human children have exceeded every expectation," reported Administrator Korvax, his compound eyes reflecting satisfaction. "They have not just adapted to our educational standards, they have improved them. Test scores across all participating species have increased by an average of 37% since the new methods were implemented." Jin Sora smiled proudly. "Our children have always been our greatest hope for the future. They see possibilities. Where adults see problems, they ask questions that challenge assumptions we did not even know we were making." The discussion was interrupted by an urgent communication from Nexus Prime Council. Leader Thax Morris appeared as a holographic projection, his 4 blue eyes showing excitement. "Ambassador Jin Sora, we have remarkable news. The Andromedian contact probe has detected signs of a previously unknown intelligent species near the galactic rim. They appear to be hostile and technologically advanced. We need humanity's help in making first contact." This was the moment Jin Sora had known would eventually come. The galaxy was asking humanity to use their unique abilities, not for conquest, but for protection and diplomacy. Her species was being invited to do what they did best: reach out to those who were different and find ways to build understanding. "We will help," she replied without hesitation. "We want to include our children in the planning process. They often see solutions that adults miss." Back in the Hannah Protocol Center, the human children were already discussing the news. Information traveled fast in galactic civilization, and they had been monitoring the communications since the first reports came in. Kim Minho was studying star charts, calculating the most efficient route to the contact zone. Song Minji was researching xenopsychology, trying to understand what might motivate a species to appear hostile to first contact attempts. Choi Dae-yoon was designing communication protocols that could work across vastly different sensory systems. But it was Park Hannah who asked the question that changed everything. "Has anyone considered that maybe they are not being hostile?" she said, looking up from her research tablet. Maybe they are just scared. Strange beings appeared near Earth with advanced technology. Some humans might react defensively to. The simplicity of her observation struck everyone in the room silent. The galaxy's greatest diplomatic and military minds had been preparing for conflict, but an 8-year-old human girl had suggested that fear, not aggression, might be driving the alien behavior. Instructor Velthera activated his communication system immediately. This insight must reach the council at once. If student Hannah is correct, our entire approach to this situation needs to change. Within hours, the consortium's first contact strategy was completely restructured around Hannah's question. Instead of approaching with defensive fleets and diplomatic warnings, they would send small, non-threatening vessels carrying messages of friendship and offers of peaceful exchange. The mission would be led by a joint human-alien team, with Park Hannah serving as the youngest diplomatic advisor in galactic history. Her role would be simple but crucial: to keep asking the questions that others were afraid to voice. As preparations began for humanity's first major contribution to galactic peace, she had quantum mechanics homework to complete and a stellar cartography exam the next day. In her mind, helping to prevent an interstellar conflict was just another interesting problem to solve, Instructor. Velthera watched her work with deep admiration. 6 months ago, he had tried to teach this small human child about proper submission to authority. Instead, she had taught him about the power of asking the right questions at the right time. The incident that had begun with a misunderstood cultural difference had transformed into something much larger. It had shown the galaxy that true strength comes not from the ability to dominate others, but from the wisdom to protect them. Not from having all the answers, but from asking better questions. Park Hannah's simple inquiry, was that supposed to be a test question and become the foundation for a new era of galactic cooperation? It was now taught in schools across dozens of star systems as an example of how curiosity and courage could change the universe. The galaxy had learned that humanity's greatest weapon was not their surprising physical capabilities or their advanced technology. It was their children's refusal to accept that things had to stay the same, just because they had always been that way. And as Park Hannah finished her homework and prepared for another day of learning and teaching, the universe itself seemed a little brighter, a little safer, and filled with infinite possibilities for those brave enough to ask the right questions. The future belonged to those who dared to wonder why things were the way they were, and whether they might be better if they were different. In that future, humanity and their alien friends would face every challenge together. Guided by the simple wisdom of a small girl who had learned that the best response to authority was not submission, but understanding, the stars waited for their questions.